Could you comment on how this particular inflationary period ranks among previous such periods in the United States, like the 1970s and 1980s? And what can American businesses and citizens do to reduce the negative impacts that inflation brings about?
Well, we've sort of attacked what you do yourself, and you develop skills that people are willing to pay for in the future, regardless of what the unit of exchange is. But in terms of inflation in our own businesses, it's extraordinary how much we've seen. I think you interviewed Herb Lumpkin at the Furniture Mart, and for 2 years, the prices have just kept coming in higher for these things, and we sell them for higher prices, and people have more money than they've had before, and they like to buy. And there's certain things they can't buy. It's like during World War II, you had a lot of money created, and people couldn't buy cars, and they couldn't buy refrigerators, and they couldn't even buy as much sugar or coffee or things as they wanted. They had little stamps and gasoline and all kinds of things. Well, eventually, if you get a lot of money in people's hands and you don't have very many goods, prices go up. Now, you can do all kinds of things to try and talk it down. And of course, inflation is never the same. Nothing in economics is the same the second time after it happens than the first, because the first affects people's attitudes, and the second, and their attitudes always influence the activity itself. I mean, it is an interesting phenomenon. People write a textbook, and they write it based on the last experience, and people read the textbook, so they behave differently next time, and then they wonder why they're getting a different result than they got the time before. So anyway, we have sent out lots and lots and lots. When I say we, I mean the United States government. The government has set out lots of money to people, and at some point, the money can't be worth as much as it was when there was less money out. Here's an interesting figure that I think probably will astound you. Sounds me anyway. The Federal Reserve every Thursday puts out a balance sheet. The Federal Reserve and Treasury, they're complicated institutions, but they do put out this kind of consolidated statement of all the various Federal Reserve banks, all these things that have entered into legislation over the years. But there's a balance sheet. And 15 years ago, roughly, if you look, the Federal Reserve issues those notes I talked about a while back. And that's the one, here's the current one. And they print these pieces of paper. And they, one way or another, they got it in the hands of people. Well, the interesting thing is, people said cash is dead and all that sort of thing, cashless society. Well, there were 800 billion, go back 10 or 15 years, but there was about 800 billion of currency in circulation. And if you look at last Thursday's report, you'll see there's something like now $2.2 trillion of currency in circulation, 2.2 trillion. Now there's about, there's 330 million people in the United States. Let's look at it that way. And with 330 million people, and you have almost 2.3 trillion of currency in circulation, that's $7,000 per person. Every man, woman, and child, in theory, has $7,000 worth of currency. Well, that isn't right, but you do know that the Federal Reserve's bookkeeping is essentially right. They've got that much that's out there. I don't know where it is. I mean, I don't know whether it's in Russia. I don't know whether it's in South America. I don't know where. I don't know whether Charlie's got it all. I mean, it's a staggering sum. Cash is dead, and yet we on average, have $7,000 for every person in the United States. Now, while you're absorbing that, think for a moment what would happen if the U.S. government said, well, they work it out in private, and they decide that they're going to send Federal Reserve, and I'm not going to blame the Federal Reserve for this. Somebody back in Washington decides they're going to send out $1 million to every household in the United States. And there are 130 million households in the United States or something like that, and they're going to mail you $1 million in cash. And there were a couple of provisions attached to it. One is, if you talked about it in the next 30 days, the money disappeared. So it was like in one of those old TV shows or something, and poof, disappears. And after 30 days, you could spend it. Well, all of a sudden, the household wealth of the United States, Federal Reserve puts out an estimate, is 130 trillion or something like that. So basically, you've doubled the household wealth. And all you've done is mailed out people. But then you don't tell them you're doing it with everybody. You just say they won the lottery or whatever it may be. And now you've got an amount equal to household wealth. You've got on average, people have doubled it. They've got this extra 130 trillion of wealth, and in a month they can spend it. Well, what's going to happen? Well, prices are going to go up, but are they going to go up immediately? Well, you don't know the other guy got it. You just know you've got it, so you don't really feel like you got to rush out and buy things. But as soon as word gets around, well, we've mailed out. If you look at the amount we've distributed, the federal government, I'm just talking about the distribution of resources. We're talking numbers like that, and it affects prices. It has to affect prices. If you had 10 times as much, if you went home and you found out you had 10 times the net worth you had yesterday, but everybody else did the same thing, it doesn't increase the amount of bread in the economy or the number of cars. It just means that the price, the value of this is going to go down, and its purchasing power, you can't buy more than exists. So it's a very strange period where we had lots of money sent out to people. One way or another we're getting it, that they didn't find as many things to buy as before, and we had supply chain disruption. We have all these things happen. But the end of it is they go out to the Nebraska Furniture Mart and they start buying things. And they do it with our other companies, and they do it in very peculiar ways. And now they're buying, one thing, jewelry stores were, generally speaking, not a very good business. And 2 years ago, every landlord that had a jewelry store or multiple jewelry stores in their mall, was wondering how they were going to get their rent. And now every jewelry store virtually is doing incredibly better than they ever dreamt, with way less inventory, because people just come in and buy. And they don't wait for sales. When they walk in the store, they're going to walk out and they're going to have bought something, and they pay for it. They got the money. So we are seeing an unleashing of the fact that we've just mailed a lot of money to people. One way or another, it's very indirect. It all gets complicated when you talk about a big system, but this is what's happened. And I will guarantee you that if we mail out $1 million to every household in the United States tonight, and you don't know that it's happened, you don't really expect much to happen in behavior tomorrow, but somehow at some point, and then if you start doing it every month, we'll say, and people really know you're doing it, then they start anticipating it and buying ahead of time and forward. I mean, there's a million things that happen in economics, but the answer is we've had a lot of inflation, and it was almost impossible not to have if you're going to mail out the kind of money we've mailed out. And it's probably a good thing we did it. In fact, I think there was one point when the Federal Reserve, which in effect creates the money, if they hadn't done it, your lives would be a lot worse, a whole lot worse now. And that was an important decision. And that's the way that's why you've had inflation. And heaven knows, I mean, it could end. You can throw the country into recession. You can do all kinds of things. The country's going to have recessions, incidentally, and it's going to have depressions periodically. And things will happen differently. And you'll read a newspaper today, and you'll wonder a year from now, why was I reading the newspaper a year ago? I mean, it's just the way it works. When I bought the first stock in 1942, did I know everything was going to happen afterwards? Of course not. I didn't know a damn thing. But I just needed to have one idea, and that idea wasn't really well formed. It was just probably the way practically every kid felt about the country when we just gone into a war. We thought America was going to win, and America was going to win then. It was going to win just generally, and savings bonds were paying 2.9%. I learned that because we bought them. They called them war bonds originally, and they called them defense bonds, and they called them savings bonds, but they were the same thing. And you print loads of money, and money is going to be worth less. Not worthless. I got in trouble doing that one time with CNBC because I said it was going to be worth separately less, but it got contracted down to worthless. So it took me a few years to learn to separate those words somehow. Anyway, that's everything I know about economics and more, and Charlie can probably improve on it.
Well, it happened on a scale this time we'd never seen before. Those checks that were just mailed out to everybody who claimed to have a business and claimed to have employees, they probably drowned the country in money for a while. And as you say, they probably had to do it. But it was something that had never been done on that scale before.
But we had a problem we hadn't had before.
Yes. No, I'm not saying it wasn't a good idea.
I mean, in my book, Jay Powell's a hero. I mean, it's very, very simple. I mean, he did what he had to do. If he had done nothing, it would be he would be, be very easy to engage in what you would call thumb sucking then. And I shouldn't say plenty of, but there are other Fed chairmen that would have been sucking their thumbs, and the world would have fallen around them. And nobody would have exactly blamed them. They would have blamed the virus and the Chinese and all kinds of things.
Well, the really interesting company is Japan, where they buy back all the debt, and then they start buying back all the common stocks. Now that's really weird. And what did they get? 25 years of stasis. Who would have predicted that?
Well, nobody predicted anything. I mean, there's nobody's predictions that we're interested in, including our own. I mean, it's very simple. What we do know is that we can deserve your trust, and there's no reason to do things that don't deserve it, and we can't tell what. But basically, we think we're trying to build a Berkshire that can't withstand a nuclear exchange, but it can withstand as much as anything that we can do anything about. And that leaves us feeling good. It doesn't leave us feeling perfect. We'd like to even promise you more than that, but we can't promise more than that. So it's very simple.